Welcome once again to another episode of the PMA Podcast. I am Landon Blackhall, joined, of course, by PokerMedia Australia Managing Director Ben Blashke. Ben, how are you, mate?
Good, Landon. How are yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. This lockdown continues and we're all still stuck at home. And what is the first thing that you're looking forward to once the COVID-19 lockdown lifts?
I think just the opportunity to go out, sit down somewhere, socialise. I assume that when things open, there'll still be social distancing measures in place of some sort for quite a while. My four favourite things in the world are basically going to the pub for a beer, going to play poker, going out for a meal with the missus, and betting on sports and watching sports. Can't do any of them at the moment. So all of those things back, I'll be very happy, man.
And one man that shares those same sentiments, I'm sure, Ben, is none other than the owner and director of LCA Poker, and certainly one of the biggest names within the Australian poker industry, Mr. Tom Bauer. Welcome to the show, sir.
It's a very flattering introduction. Thank you.
Tom, now, of course, you've been involved in broadcasting, television, web streaming there for a long time. Obviously, with everything going on at the moment, there's no poker to cover. Are there any other projects that you might perhaps be working on right now?
So currently I'm studying a master's in poker body language. My thesis is going to be whether poker players make a better lie detector than the average human. Statistically, the average human detects lies at about a 50-50 ratio. So we're pretty much, most of us can coin flip with lie detection, but I'm curious to see whether successful poker players are able to adapt or detect lies or untruths at a higher ratio. There's a lot to body language. Unfortunately, it's never as simple as the movies make out. You know, the wink or the twitching eye doesn't exactly mean this, that, and the other. But I would like to determine if there is something empirical or evidential based that can actually be demonstrated and proven. And certainly there's baselining and techniques. And the biggest thing that I have found with all of the poker stuff and all of the body language study is mindfulness, and actually being able to clear your mind and do a lot of meditative and mindfulness training as part of that is enormously helpful.
Now, one of the subjects I wanted to touch on today, particularly since we've got Tom on the show, Tom, you spent a long time working quite high up with PokerStars back in the day. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to join PokerStars back in 2007, right in the peak of the big explosion, I would suggest. Originally, I came on board as a poker specialist, so my role there was analysing people playing. We're looking at collusion detection, collusion prevention, and discussing the RNG or the shuffle. I then moved into a training role, so teaching other people to do that, and eventually became the head of training in Australia. With that exposure, I sort of got access to everything that PokerStars does. It's a phenomenal company to work for. The philosophy that was very much created by Mark and I with the Scheinbergs was a really strong passion for people, poker, and professionalism, and that was very much upheld. I left PokerStars before they sold to Amaya. I have been disappointed, I think, with the direction that PokerStars have gone in since Amaya have taken over. It's an understandable direction, obviously. Once you become a public listed company, you have shareholders and share prices to address and adhere to. But since then, I think that it's definitely changed direction. And one of the things I was very proud of to say was that I only ever worked for a poker company. When I worked for PokerStars, there was never online casino, gambling, or sports books. So it was never against the customers. And in that way, when you start to actually bet against customers, you still maintain your integrity. And I'm not suggesting by any means that they don't run a fair deck, but the argument is more difficult when you are actually competing for your customers' money and it's you versus the house.
I've got a couple of questions for you, Tom. That was a really fascinating period in the whole poker world back in the boom, the heydays after 2006. So, PokerStars, as you say, was, the ones that kept themselves clean. They kept their noses clean. At a time when we saw, the ultimate bet situation, we saw even, full tilt with the ownership there and funds not being available. A couple of other sites, Absolute Poker, of course, in a scandal as well. I mean, you were sitting in a company that was doing everything it could to provide a quality product to players. How damaging was it for the industry if you look around and see all these other guys and these terrible headlines hitting the industry at that time?
Well, see, it was a fascinating period, as you say. So I got to work right through Black Friday. I can tell you the day that it happened. Sunday morning, 11 o'clock for me, I got a phone call saying, have you seen the website? Log on. As soon as we logged on, the FBI logo comes up. Rushed into the office and everyone working as hard as they can on a Sunday trying to answer customer questions to which we did not know the answers. So for the Black Friday scandals and for any of that, it was a really interesting period of time. There was a reporter on 2+2, Diamond Flush. She did most of the reporting and eventually the interview basis with Howard Lederer when that eventually came through. But for us as employees at PokerStars, it was very much living on the forums. We knew what the customers knew, which was just unbelievable. Personally, I got to work with Michael Josem, who was the investigator who sourced the AP and Ultimate Bet scandals on the super user accounts. So I was there when the Australian office headhunted Michael and brought him on board to be what he eventually became, which was very high up in PokerStars, working out of the Isle of Man. But that was a fascinating period of time as well, to see that there were poker sites where owners were actively playing against their customers and looking at hole cards. And it makes it very difficult for the industry to then represent, that they are the global good guys. I say that in the sense that PokerStars were very much proven to be doing everything right when it came to bailout. So when it came time to cashing out the customers, as it was explained to us by the Scheinbergs, essentially was twice a day, the books at PokerStars are balanced. The total books, which is total customer balance, would then be taken down to the banks through their Isle of Man license and balanced off there as well. And in that way, they were able to, if they ever needed to, cash out every single customer. As it worked out, obviously, Full Tilt were not able to do the same. Operational funds were very much merged in with player funds. And unfortunately, that took many, many years before PokerStars were able to sort of bail them out of that situation as well, with the enormous fines and processes and transactions that happened. But it's an interesting time. I mean, we can certainly make the argument that PokerStars became as big as they were after the UEIGA, which is the American version of their licensing, because they stayed open. So the determination that PokerStars made was that it's not illegal to play poker in America. It is illegal to use an American bank account. So if you can get money online through any other methods, right through until e-checks was invented, they stayed up in the States. And that certainly is what made them the behemoth in the industry leader that they were. Party Poker and one of the other smaller brands pulled out, and PokerStars took over and have essentially stayed number one.
It probably leads us quite well into what we're experiencing now in Australia, with everybody at home looking for things to do, and of course we don't have a regulated online poker industry. I mean, first of all, do you see that changing anytime soon?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting mirror in the way that it's happening. Arguably, PokerStars became as big as they did because they stayed open in a questionable space. They've since obviously balanced and legislated, and ASI currently is finally the last to be prosecuted and is currently in that process at the moment. Online here in Australia, I don't think the space is as questionable as it ever was in the States. I think the UEIGA did have an element of grey to it. Unfortunately, the current legislation in Australia with online poker, I don't think there's any grey in there. I think it's very black and white that operating or providing an online poker environment to customers from within Australia or from outside of Australia in an unlicensed, unregulated environment is against the law.
Obviously, with the temporary suspension of live poker in Australia, many, many players, both recreational and professional and everywhere in between, are all flocking to online channels. History has shown us with so many different things that prohibition doesn't work. And I think that once we get to a point where the coronavirus lockdown is over and we start lifting the restrictions on social distancing, etc., we get back to the live game, we should be okay. But my concern is that the way that people are going about advertising, marketing, promoting online poker right now, in full defiance of the legislation, I'm concerned that karma's going to come back and bite them. And it almost mirrors the behavior that we saw from all the old school providers back in the day before Black Friday happened. Will history repeat itself?
Yeah, my short answer is yes. I mean, I think, okay, if you look at where people are playing at the moment, obviously, PPP is using sort of the agent system. There are a couple of sites, ACR, Ignition, that are making themselves available to Australian players. There are some other methods being used to essentially have money on free play games that aren't really free play games. So there's all sorts of ways that people are using to play. Now, some of them are more transparent or more easy to find than others. As you said, some of them are blatantly advertising themselves. Plenty of players are playing. I'm actually keen to ask Tom his thoughts on some of this, but I think that, as you say, right now the government's a bit distracted with something else. But I think that if they keep this up, then eventually there'll be more crackdowns. And but I mean, every time we've seen a few examples of some sites being shut down and fines given out. Luke Braben, of course, with Poker Asia Pacific, and turning it into an online site was, I think, the first high-profile one. But more sites will make themselves available. So it's this process of, regulators catching up with sites and then more people taking a risk. But yes, they will come down.
I think I'm obviously very passionate about this, given that my background was with PokerStars. So PokerStars just were the good guys. Examples of that include things like, you can't look up as a staff member. There was no access to pro accounts. Oh, I want to check out how much Daniel Negreanu's got in his account. Okay, great. You've logged into his account. I'd like you to explain why. Okay, you no longer have a job. It's a very simple black and white process. Australian staff members, for example, were not able to look at any account within Australia. So you can't look up and see what your mate's doing or anything like that. It was a very firm, regulated, professional process. I know within the operators, a lot of these operators, I mean, we all definitely know people who are doing this. And a lot of them are trying to operate cleanly and within the scope of the environment. But my biggest concern is the players who are currently playing don't understand the inherent risk of playing online in an unregulated market. And I'd love to just share some of those concerns, because I think it's an important opportunity to just go, okay, it's fine to play as a player online. There currently isn't any penalty for players in Australia, but this is the inherent risk that you play under.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to ask you, Tom. That was the next question is, what are the risks? Because, first of all, are these sites safe? Well, we don't know in all these cases in terms of collusion. And also, what about just simple thing of withdrawing your money? Can you get your money out when you get that?
Well, this is the main way. So probably the most, or the biggest method that is happening currently in Australia is online through app-based club systems. So a couple of the major brands are PP Poker and Poker Bros. They're probably the biggest that are currently operating within Australia at the moment. We're seeing continued advertisements of 2 million being guaranteed a month now, and guarantees currently under lockdown just being absolutely smashed. So we have tournaments with $150,000 guarantees reaching $260,000. This is the problem that players don't understand. Firstly and foremostly, any online gaming site, free money or real money, needs to offer a responsible gaming program which includes self-exclusion. And that's vastly important, because as an operator of poker, real or play money, you are taking something from your customers. And it may just be their time. It may just be they have wasted their day, which could have been more productive, and they need to exclude themselves. And so if you're failing to offer responsible gaming or options for self-exclusion to your players, then you are not treating your players with respect. And that's a huge feature that's missing from all of these sites right now.
Yeah, it's a great point, Tom. And I think that more than anything is the best advertisement for a regulated online gaming market, because banning anything, we know that doesn't work. I actually wrote a story for another publication recently, last week, I think, that online gaming has risen 67% in the past week since everybody's been shut down. Now, given that there's not much sports betting going on at the moment because there's no sport, so this has to be on illegal offshore operators for the most part.
100%. And look, I'm passionate about online poker. I have played and will continue to play. I hope that online poker comes back and is regulated. The best possible thing that we could be doing for that is pushing through the Australian Online Poker Alliance with Joey Del Duca's work. He has had the most success in getting us close to having regulation and returning that license to Australia. My understanding of the law and the legislation is that it was not intended to necessarily catch online poker within the net, but as part of the restriction or prediction or blocking of in-game sports betting, online poker became caught up in that.
Yeah, in fact, Joey even mentioned to me that one very well noted anti-gambling campaigner in Australia said to him,
Yeah.
I actually agree with you, Joey, about poker. It shouldn't be in there, but I can't say that. Now,
I
that's not my...
believe there was a public statement from possibly the same senator. Just in case I won't drop the name, but yeah, there was a very famous anti-gambling senator that said it shouldn't be caught up under this, which is interesting. Look, some of the other risks, you touched upon, Ben, the issue of collusion. So working at PokerStars, formerly as a collusion specialist, it was never my passion, so I'm not going to speak very highly of my role in that regard, but I worked very heavily with the collusion team. PokerStars employs a vast number of people who do both reactive and proactive collusion detection, which is software triggered and customer reported. And the online sites currently just do not offer that. PP Poker are claiming currently, they have a new media release which states that they've employed a large team of poker specialists to do so, but this is only within the shared lobby environment of their global lobby. Within individual clubs, you cannot have access to whole card information. If they do, that's even more of a concern to me. But without access to whole card information, then it's impossible to do a collusion investigation. So it's just not happening. And that means to me there is no protection against collusive or collusion players. Yes, we have GPS restrictions. Yes, we have IP restrictions, but collusion can very easily be beaten throughout that. My other fear or concern is you're obviously playing against owners or agents. So a big methodology with this poker site is that agents are essentially getting a kickback or rake percentages, but they are still playing on the sides. Now, if you're playing online, one of the, or possibly the largest advantage of playing online is the anonymity it provides you. So if I walk into a casino, people know it's Tom and they know he's a terrible player and they're going to push him because he can do this, that and the other. Whereas if I play online, they don't know what my name is. So until they've built up a reputation for playing against me, they will never know who I am or how I'm playing, and that has to be learnt and re-baselined every time. Worryingly to me, the PP Poker apps actually offer you the ability to change your user ID, which PokerStars never did. They were very strict on the option of changing your name. That's your name. You get it once. Eventually, the policy was changed to allow one name change, given a really small set of requirements. PP extends that opportunity and allows players to constantly change their name, which in my mind goes against the entire spirit of poker anyway. But one advantage that your owners and agents have is not only that they know who they're playing, so they know who the customers are, they also know what's in your bankroll. And so knowing your deposit patterns and how often you deposit and how much you currently have in your account is a huge level of advantaged information that they should not have against you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like knowing that this person's got one buy-in in front of them and that's all they've got, versus someone who's got an endless amount of buy-ins. It changes the entire approach.
Now, I don't say that all owners or all agents are doing this, but I highlight it to customers who are playing online to understand that this is the environment in which they are playing. And the other thing that frightens me enormously, of course, and with my experience in working with PokerStars and PokerStars essentially buying out Full Tilt Poker, I was there throughout that entire process, is the element of the whole thing being a Ponzi scheme. So I know from experience that these sites are getting hit with customers who are sending transfers or fake screenshots or not balancing their deposits. Because these sites cannot offer you a deposit method which is balanced, because it's illegal within Australia, there is no way for them to check whether the deposits have cleared or not. So there are some sites that have created multiple banking account methods and used instant deposit transactions and balancing things that way. But you are going to be at risk of playing against someone who may not actually have that money there. So Joe Bloggs says that he's transferred $200. A club owner gives him 200 chips. He then plays and loses that 200 and decides to cancel or reject the bank transaction. And because these sites don't have a legit eligibility or a legality to claim back at that money just doesn't exist. So if there is a run on the bank and every club was to cash out their players immediately right now, are they able to do it? And more so, any of the figures that are in the 5-figure pools or larger, how are they going to be able to get that money to their customers instantly? without triggering any of the anti-money laundering or terrorism funding charges. Because the first charge we talk about is the IGA, or the Internet Gaming Enforcement Act within Australia, and we're talking about a fine of anywhere between $1.2 million per day per operation. That's the first charges you're going to suffer. But then on top of that, you're going to be hit with anti-money laundering, tax evasion, and possible terrorism funding. Now, I know that's vast and big and explosive, and I'm not suggesting that any of these sites are committing terrorism funding, but the two, AML and terrorism funding, always go hand in hand. Lastly, the problem that I also have with owners and agents playing is the potential that they're not under the same financial pressure that you or I are. So if I sit at a poker table at the casino and I put $1,000 cash down, that $1,000 is real. It's transactionary. I touch it. I feel it. I know what that meant to me. As an agent or an owner, you are given virtual chips as soon as you start a club. Now, those chips only have value when you put value to them. So the ability for you to give yourself chips or give your friends chips or give anyone else chips is untapped. Obviously, if you're losing and you're going to continue to run your club, you do need to pay your players. But when you're able to buy chips, effectively, if you buy them big enough at 40 cents to the dollar or less, the financial pressure you as an owner feel, if you're sitting down with 1,000 chips, may only be $40. And for you or for me to put you in a tough spot, making bluffs, making it hard for you to make calls, it may be much easier for those owners and agents to be able to play against you, given that the dollar cost value for chips to them just isn't the same. And that's the biggest reason why unregulated poker is of concern to me. It's just not a level playing field for the customer experience at all.
I think one of my biggest concerns, throughout this whole discussion and throughout everything that I've heard, that I've seen, is given that there's just so much risk with this unregulated online market, it's only going to take one article within mainstream media for it to all blow up. And that's going to have such a detrimental knock-on effect within the live poker industry. There's no question. The same thing happened when Black Friday first hit worldwide. We saw such a huge dip in live numbers. It's slowly but surely built back up again. And particularly here in Australia, there's been so much work from so many people within the last 5 or 6 years. Are you afraid that that's all going to come undone?
Look, personally, I think it's frightening, because given the hard work that we've all done to bring poker out from the dark cigar-filled back rooms, poker is in the light. It's celebrated as a professional, successful sport. There's been so much research and evidence that it is a mind sport. There has been a lot of work to take poker out from the dark rooms and be something that can be celebrated as a successful pastime and perhaps a skill-based gaming model. The difficulty will be if one of these major rooms is shut down and player funds are confiscated, we are talking vast sums of money that are just gone. Now, I understand that the clubs are moving the money around as fast as possible and doing everything they can to protect it, putting it offshore, but anything that comes through an online bank account is so easily forensically traced. This isn't cash. This isn't a cash economy. It's moved electronically. There is a very obvious and clear paper trail. And like you said before, Landon, people are advertising it blatantly. They're not hiding the fact they're doing it. There's no nudge, nudge, wink, wink. So the problem is when it eventually gets raided and shut down, John Smith, who runs a poker league, is going to have a real hard time selling to his pubs when we have 2 weeks of headline news showing the millions of dollars that have been laundered, played for illegally, tax not paid, and poker gets given a bad name again. The investment should be towards legalising poker, getting us a licence, getting us back to being regulated, and putting that money back through the economy. But there's no investment going into that process right now.
Yeah, I'm interested in, sorry, Tom, I'm interested in the best way to get the message across to a little bit the public, but also to the regulators about, putting a convincing argument about the need to regulate online poker. And I'm wondering what the best approach to do that is. And perhaps the best approach is to show the dangers of not regulating it.
Yeah, I tend to believe that would be the strongest approach, is to show that, look, the industry has exploded and this is the amount of people that are at risk. Because responsible gaming is a big concern and should be a big concern for these operators. And nobody is offering responsible gaming. It's not a feature in PP, it's not a feature in Poker Bros, and it's very infrequently a feature that's talked about. But for example, Zynga Poker, the online free-to-play app where you can pay money to buy a cocktail or a fancy hat for your avatar. I mean, we could argue that that is the most toxic form of poker alive. You're never winning money at all. But they even offer a responsible gaming. And without that, the customers being at risk is a huge concern. And the other argument, of course, would have to be the amount of revenue that could be taxed from it. You know, all gaming providers are happy to pay tax given that they're able to legislate and run. If they were able to do deposit methods, it stops the risk that they are currently under. And this idea that players are shortchanging them or not depositing or cashing, it would make it much easier for them if they could actually legislate.
My question to you, Tom, and I think this is just speaking from personal experience, during and after Black Friday, although there's obviously been a number of movements worldwide in terms of, people, lobby groups working to push towards regulated online poker, I always get the sense that there's a lot of apathy from players when it comes to being approached by these groups and saying, look, will you come on board to join our cause? And are you concerned also that there might be a lot of that apathy rising up again from players? And
yeah, 100%. I mean, the apathy is best demonstrated with Joey Del Duca's push. So Joey worked very hard, had a really good voice, and we all knew this was coming. And he put a request for people to make Senate submissions. All of those Senate submissions are public. Ben, you may remember the number. I'm not sure, but it was very low. I want to say it was sub 100, but I really would be guessing. All you had to do was write a submission explaining that poker is a skill-based game and a passionate hobby of yours. It didn't have to do empirical-based evidence, but we couldn't get people to do that. And that's when we needed it the most, before the legislation was passed. The government did a house paper and a trial test on online poker within Australia. And it came back that a legislated, legalised trial of online tournament-based poker should happen. That was prior to the IGA coming in Australia. And it just didn't happen. And unfortunately, it is the apathy of these owners. In some way, it's because of the money that the club owners are making and the agents are making right now. I mean, we have people in Australia clearly pushing 4 and 5 figures weekly in rake. That's how much is being earned by players and club owner and operators right now. It's a ticking bomb, right? That's what we're sitting on. And the bigger it gets, the more it's going to hurt. Because if a club is shut down or a union group is shut down and the forensic accounting is done on all of these bank accounts, then all that money is going to be locked up. Now, you can make a strong argument in case that that's players' funds and not operational funds. But if there's no tax being paid, which clearly there isn't because there's no business registration, there's no money laundering controls being made because the amount of times the bank accounts that you deposit to changes. The bank accounts are under fake names, and all of that information is publicly available through these blatant advertisements. You want to deposit, message me here, message me there. And worse is the agents that are suggesting that, no, it's all legal. We found a loophole. There isn't a loophole. The nature of that law is very black and white. And if there was a loophole, the counter argument again comes back to then, why are you not offering responsible gaming? If you genuinely care about your poker players and the poker community, then offer them a clean, safe environment to play and offer them exclusion and responsible gaming protections. And until you do that, you are not legal.
Yeah, it's a great point, Tom. This discussion could probably go on for hours. There's so much to talk about. But
I'm very clearly passionate about it, obviously.
No, as you should be. And it's certainly, it's so topical at the moment with the environment that we're in. I mean, there's no better time to discuss all of this. I think we'll definitely have to get you back on sometime to further the discussion and see where we're at in a month or two's time.
Yeah, but look, very clearly, and just to make my final points, I am pro online poker. I like it. I worked in the industry. I loved the industry. It allowed me to travel the world. I met all the poker pros that I ever wanted to. I was exposed to sites and players and customers run in the best possible way. And I love the opportunity it gives you. Personally, for me, I love live poker more. That's the beauty of the game that we all love. Within my study, within my passion, and just within my social interaction, I love live poker. But I am pro online poker and I hope it is legalised and legislated. But until then, customers just need to understand the inherent risk when they play on.
I think it's safe to say that we do share those sentiments. And look, this is going to be, I think, a discussion that needs to be continued and ongoing. We'll leave it there for now, but this has been an amazing, very insightful discussion. And Tom, thank you so much for coming on today. If you want to keep up with everything that's going on with PMA, follow us, PokerMedia Australia on Facebook. Head on to our website, pokermedia.com.au. For Ben Blaschke, Tom Bauer, I'm Landon Blackwell. This is the PMA Podcast. We'll see you next time. Bye for now. My fellow commentator from the most recent WPT League, Mr. Tom Bauer. Tom, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you very much for having us, and a very smooth approach there by the hardworking.
Yes, it's a cameo appearance from the for the better half there. That will go into the final edit. Ha 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 ha. Sleeping on the couch, she says.
Standard then.
Standard.